Hello, this is the Lord's Legion and welcome to a brand new countdown. And seeing as how many of you guys seem to really enjoy these countdown lists featuring concept art, I thought that it's finally time to carry on with that little trend. And given how many of you guys keep on giving me so many requests revolving around concept art in relation to other film franchises, I have decided to make a little poll on this video for you guys to pick which one would you like to see next. And the one that receives the most votes will be the one that I'll end up doing next. But in the meantime, let's focus on the main topic at hand, which is of course concept art featuring the X-Men film series. And given how this is the longest film franchise revolving around the comic book series, I thought to myself, you know what, let's make a top 20. Because there's so much material that is very interesting revolving around the X-Men film series. So without further ado, let's begin with the list. So kicking off at number 20, we have Bonebreaker from Logan. Now I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I am not too familiar with this character in the comics, however from what I can gather, he is one of the Reavers. And when you compare this concept art to the original Bonebreaker from the comics, this does seem pretty accurate. However, with this version of Bonebreaker, he is meant to blend in with the shitty future that is represented in Logan. Now to me, Bonebreaker is one of these characters who I'm not 100% sure on whether he should have been in the final product or not, because for the most part, Bonebreaker is a side villain. But that being said, I can't deny that this version of Bonebreaker does look very kick-ass. Coming in at number 19, we have a sleeker Havok from X-Men First Class. Now to me, Havok is one of these characters in the X-Men film series who has been very underdeveloped, and I wish that they could have done more with this character. That being said, I think that this version of Havok does look very fascinating, at least in the concept art, because here his powers are demonstrated to be all the more unstable. And Havok just looks like a force of nature. And although Havok in this concept art is for the most part a silhouette, it does seem like that he was originally going to have a completely different costume, and that this Havok would have been more comic accurate. But again, I feel like this Havok is a cooler looking version in comparison to what we ended up getting. Coming in at number 18, we have a demonic Azrael from First Class. Now although he didn't have as much screen time as majority of the other mutants in that film, I still thought that Azrael was a pretty kick-ass character. But unfortunately, that character was killed off before even Days of Future passed. And given how he is the supposed father to Nightcrawler, that is a huge misstep. But what I really like about this concept art featuring Azrael is the fact that he just looks all the more sinister. And there's a lot more demonic elements featuring his character design, which to me would have made him all the more stand out. And this version of Azrael gains bonus points because again, he does look more comic book accurate. Next at number 17, we have Future Jubilee from Days of Future Past. In every movie that Jubilee makes an appearance in, she is always pushed to the sidelines, to the point where it became an ongoing gag throughout the film series. However, it was pretty cool that they were willing to break that mold by having her join the fight against the Future Sentinels. And it would have been cool to finally see Jubilee showcase some of her powers. Now for the most part, her character design does seem pretty standard, at least in terms of all the future characters. But because of that whole idea of her finally unleashing her powers for the first time, I just had to give Jubilee a spot on this list. Coming in at number 16, we have Modern Beast from First Class. Now Beast to me is very interesting because he had a ton of potential designs throughout First Class, because they were clearly experimenting on both the classic and the modern incarnations of the character. Now this first design of Beast to me looks more like a Sasquatch than anything else. That being said, you can still sense some of that cat version of Beast from the modern comics. And then of course we have this version of Beast where he just looks all the more monstrous than anything else. Almost to the point where he looks like a werewolf. And although these versions of Beast do seem a little too weird in comparison to your traditional Beast, you can't deny that these designs for Beast are very creative. Coming in at number 15, we have Brad Pitt Cable from Deadpool 2. Now this entire concept is very interesting on so many levels. Mainly because, you know, it's Brad Pitt as Cable. And I can't deny that Josh Brolin is the definitive Cable as far as I'm concerned, but even then, Brad Pitt? If this became a reality, then we would have had a completely different version of Cable. And what's really interesting about this design is the fact that this Cable does look more cybernetic in comparison to your traditional Cable. Almost to the point where he looks like the Terminator. Ultimately, I have no idea on whether this would have worked or not, but even with that being said, you can't deny that this is a very interesting concept for Cable. Coming in at number 14, we have Gothic Lady Deathstrike from X2. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I am not a huge fan of X2, but even I can't deny that Lady Deathstrike was one of the major standouts in the entire film, despite how she wasn't really in it all that much. Now, it's no secret that a common complaint in terms of the earlier X-Men films is the fact that they lacked in any colour in terms of costumes. However, I feel like if they were to use this design for Lady Deathstrike, then this would have been perfect for her. She has her iconic hair, she has the Japanese tattoos around her body, and even her fingers look all the more cybernetic in comparison to what we ended up guessing. And you can't deny that this is the perfect amalgamation between both the comic book version of Deathstrike as well as what was established from Bryan Singer. Now we get to number 13, we have the 90s Jean Grey from X-Men Apocalypse. Now sure, Jean Grey did have her traditional costume by the end of Apocalypse, but this alternate costume just blows the final product right out of the water, because this costume just really embraces the essence of an X-Men costume. And to me, this costume for Jean Grey does somewhat resemble something that you would see from the MCU. And trust me, this is a huge compliment because, again, I just really love this design for Jean Grey. It just shows that you could literally adapt the 90s costume and modernize it a bit and you can still make it work. Coming in at number 12, we have the Deadpool mask from Origins Wolverine. Now, there were so many designs for Deadpool going into Origins, and majority of them just looked complete trash. However, this is the closest thing we got to the comic book Deadpool. And you can clearly see that his helmet does form into the iconic mask that Deadpool has in the comics. And this also scores points for the fact that this version of Deadpool has no pupils. But what really makes me so interested about this version of Deadpool is the fact that you can see some elements of the Ultimate Deadpool. Because Ultimate Deadpool has that similar glass helmet in which restrains his entire face. And if they went with this design, then at the very least I would have been like, okay, this is some strange version of Deadpool. Because at the end of the day, anything is better than the final product. Coming in at number 11, we have the ninja fight from the Wolverine. Now to this day, I still very much enjoy the Wolverine for the most part, and the major standout is of course the ninja fight. But this concept art to me is very glorious because as it's showcased here, there were gonna be more ninjas, more chains, and above all else more gritty and hardcore. Now there really isn't too much to say about this one because we pretty much got it from the final product. Only a lot of it was cut out, but I just wanted to put it so high because it just looks so breathtaking. And it would have been awesome to see a more hardcore version of this entire fight. So coming in at number 10, we have the diamond forms from First Class. Now I'm not gonna lie to you guys, Emma Frost was one of the more boring characters in First Class and her diamond form wasn't too great to see. That being said, I really enjoyed this set of concept art because it just shows the different versions that they could have went with her diamond form. The one on the left for the most part just looks like a diamond statue, while the one in the middle just looks more like armory than anything else, which is a unique take on Emma Frost's diamond form. Though my personal favourite is the one on the right in which she looks completely icy, and she really gives Iceman a run for his money. Coming in at number 9, we have the edgy retro X-Men from the original X-Men. Now these designs just look really bizarre to me. First of all, we have Wolverine, in which although does have his yellow spandex, he just looks very anime. And if we look really carefully on his claws, you can see some hints of blood, which could actually hint towards a more violent film. And then of course we also have Cyclops and Jean Grey, who for the most part just look completely standard. However, the most interesting one out of the bunch is of course Mystique's design, to which she resembles a humanoid viper. And I really dig this design because at first glance you can tell that she is a very sleazy villain, almost like a poisonous femme fatale. And out of all of these designs here, I think that Mystique would have been the most visually interesting, and could actually translate onto the big screen quite well. Coming in at number 8, we have the classic Sentinels from X2. Now Fox have been wanting to use the Sentinels for a very long time, ever since X2. And to me, this early concept of the Sentinels make the ones from Days of Future Past look like complete shit by comparison. Because unlike those Sentinels, this one does resemble a Sentinel. And although they don't have the exact colour of a traditional Sentinel, they still resemble what they look like from the comics. From their head to their size to even their arms and legs. And why we didn't get this version of the Sentinels is beyond me. Coming in at number 7 we have the comic costume Magneto from the original X-Men. Now if the X-Men were to be rebooted or even dragged into the MCU, then this is exactly how I would imagine Magneto to look like. And this design for Magneto is completely spot on. From the colour palette to the cape to even the helmet, it just looks perfect. Now I do understand that this wouldn't have worked in Bryan Singer's vision for the X-Men series, but given how in recent memory the series is going for more of the comic book feel, this costume could totally work because it looks exactly like the classic Magneto but just all the more sleek. Coming in at number 6 we have the proto Deadpool suit from Deadpool. Now there's no two ways about this, the movie costume is the perfect costume for Deadpool. But this proto costume looks just as kick-ass. It looks very faithful but at the same time has this more gritty take in a similar fashion to the Amazing Spider-Man costume. His eyes are all the more visible, his mask resembles a hockey mask in which has the Deadpool colours on, and his overall costume just looks completely dirty and homemade. And as much as I love the movie costume, I feel like that this gritty take on the Deadpool costume, or rather the proto suit, is in the same level of awesomeness. Coming in at number 5 we have the classic Beast from First Class. Now like I said earlier, they were completely experimental in terms of Beast's design. And in this one right here, he does clearly look more like the classic Beast. And even his hair is completely reminiscent to the one from the 90s. And yes, this version of Beast does look completely skinny in comparison to your traditional Beast, but again, this is a very interesting attempt. But then on the other hand, you have this version of Beast, which is a perfect amalgamation of both the 90s Beast as well as the modern Beast. And this one is probably my personal favourite because it just has the best of both worlds. He has his more retro hairstyle, but at the same time he also has his more modern facial features, which to me would have actually worked. Coming in at number 4 we have Juggernaut from Days of Future Past. Now some of you guys may be shocked by this, but Juggernaut was originally going to be in Days of Future Past instead of Quicksilver. And yes, it's true that this is a completely different take on Juggernaut's costume, but looks a million times better in comparison to The Last Stand. Because his colour palette is completely visible, and not only that, his arm guards are exactly the same as the ones from the comics, albeit a little more grungy. And given how this is meant to be the Juggernaut from the future, this totally works. And although he isn't wearing his iconic helmet from the comics, his hood as well as his mask does make up for this. And with this design for Juggernaut, I can tell that this does look like Juggernaut. And a pretty badass one at that. Coming in at number 3 we have Teenage X-23 from Logan. Now everyone knows that Daphne Keene's X-23 is absolutely perfect. However, these designs for X-23 are extremely fascinating, because these 3 designs seem more accurate in comparison to the one we ended up getting. Because in the comics, X-23 is not only older, but she also has more of this rebellious gothic aesthetic to her. And seeing as how Daphne Keene will reprise her role as X-23 for quite a while, he is hoping that she will eventually adopt one of these costumes. Because these designs for X-23 just look completely spot on. Coming in at number 2 we have the real Apocalypse from X-Men Apocalypse. Now I hate to beat a dead horse here, but why didn't they pick this design? Like, this looks exactly like the comics, but altered so that he could fit in into Bryan Singer's vision. And this design would have been brilliant and could translate itself so well onto the big screen. And it baffles my mind as to how this design for Apocalypse was completely scrapped while the final design got a thumbs up. And this is so depressing because they were so close into making one of the best X-Men villains of all time seem perfect. But in the end, they managed to screw themselves over. And finally, for number 1 we have the real Phoenix from The Last Stand. Again, like Apocalypse, they were so close. I mean, look at these early designs for Phoenix. You can clearly see the Phoenix Force while completely blended in with Jean's psychic abilities. And they even had the flaming beard. This is especially depressing because they were building up to the Phoenix Saga in X2 only for them to completely butcher it in The Last Stand. And sure, they're trying again with X-Men Dark Phoenix, but come on, you were so close. So which piece of concept art did you find the most fascinating throughout the X-Men film series? Comment below and share some thoughts, and don't forget to visit the poll and vote on which film series I should make a concept art list next. And as always, thank you guys for watching this video, please like and subscribe, take care and have a good one.